The summer sun blazed through the airport terminal windows as 11-year-old Anya wheeled her small purple suitcase toward Gate B7. Her aunt had just dropped her off for her first-ever solo flight from New York to Los Angeles, where her father was waiting. Despite her initial nervousness, Anya felt a surge of pride. She was traveling like a grown-up. She clutched her special boarding pass, printed on the airline's premium gold paper, marking her as an unaccompanied minor. Her father had assured her that the airline staff would take excellent care of her. After all, he had personally overseen the training program for handling young passengers, though Anya rarely mentioned this to anyone. As she approached the gate, Anya noticed how different everything felt without adults hovering around her. The gate area buzzed with activity, business travelers typing furiously on laptops, families corralling energetic children, and flight attendants in crisp uniforms striding purposefully through the terminal. Anya smoothed down her favorite blue dress and approached the gate counter, just as her father had instructed. "Excuse me," she said politely to the gate agent, "I'm traveling alone today." She held up her golden boarding pass with both hands. The gate agent, a kind-faced woman named Mrs. Chen, immediately broke into a warm smile. "Of course, sweetie. Let me check you in properly." She carefully reviewed Anya's documents and attached a bright orange, unaccompanied minor, tag to her backpack. "Our flight attendants will take good care of you," Mrs. Chen assured her. The pre-boarding announcement crackled over the speakers, and Mrs. Chen personally escorted Anya onto the plane ahead of other passengers. However, as they approached the aircraft door, they encountered flight attendant Rita Patterson, who was already wearing a sour expression. "Another Rita muttered under her breath, loud enough for Anya to hear. "That's the third one today. They're always such a handful." She barely glanced at Anya's premium boarding pass or her carefully prepared travel documents. Anya's heart sank a little, but she remembered her father's words about staying confident. She had flown dozens of times with her parents and knew all the proper airplane etiquette. Still, Rita's cold demeanor made her feel unwelcome. "She needs to be in seat 3C, Mrs. Chen explained, pointing to the premium cabin. "It's airline policy for UMs on long-haul flights." Rita's expression darkened further. "Premium cabin? We're nearly full up there with actual paying customers. Can't she sit in economy? It's not like she'll know the difference." Anya felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She wanted to explain that her father had specifically arranged this seat, that she wasn't just some random child being shuffled around. But the words stuck in her throat. Mrs. Chen frowned. "The system assigned her this seat, Rita. It's not up for discussion." She turned to Anya with an apologetic smile. "Go ahead, sweetheart. Your seat is right there, by the window." As Anya settled into her seat, she could hear Rita complaining to another flight attendant. "These privileged kids get special treatment while regular passengers who saved up for months get bumped to economy. It's ridiculous." The next hour proved challenging for Anya. When the drink service began, Rita deliberately skipped her row twice. When Anya finally raised her hand to ask for some water, Rita responded with an exaggerated sigh. "You'll have to wait. We're serving our priority passengers first." Anya wanted to point out that she was sitting in the premium cabin, but she remained quiet, not wanting to cause any trouble. She distracted herself by watching the clouds outside her window and thinking about seeing her father soon. The situation worsened when Anya accidentally dropped her book during some turbulence. Before she could unfasten her seatbelt to retrieve it, Rita stormed over. "You need to stay in your seat," she snapped, much more harshly than necessary. "This isn't a playground." A businessman across the aisle gave Anya a sympathetic look and pressed his call button. When another flight attendant responded, he quietly asked, "Is everything okay with how that young girl is being treated? I've been watching, and it seems rather unprofessional." The other flight attendant, Grace, had also noticed Rita's behavior and promised to keep an eye on the situation. During her next pass through the cabin, Grace made sure to give Anya a kind smile and a small packet of cookies. As the flight progressed, Rita's attitude didn't improve. When Anya needed to use the restroom, Rita made her wait unnecessarily long, claiming the premium cabin lavatory was reserved for adult passengers. Several nearby passengers exchanged concerned glances, clearly uncomfortable with how the young girl was being treated. What Rita didn't realize was that her actions were being carefully noted, not just by passengers, but by an off-duty crew member who recognized Anya from company photographs. This crew member discreetly began documenting the incidents on her phone, knowing that this situation would need to be addressed. Throughout it all, Anya maintained her composure, though her eyes occasionally welled with tears. She kept reminding herself that her father was waiting in Los Angeles, and that thought gave her strength. She also remembered his frequent lessons about treating everyone with respect, even when they didn't return the courtesy. As the flight entered its final hour, Anya overheard Rita talking to another crew member near the galley. "I don't understand why these kids get special treatment," she was saying. "Back in my day, children knew their place. Now they act like they own the airline." Little did Rita know that in a few hours, she would learn exactly who owned the airline, and her perspective on treating young passengers with respect was about to change dramatically. For now, though, Anya simply hugged her backpack closer and watched the California coastline appear through breaks in the clouds, counting down the minutes until she could run into her father's arms and finally feel welcome again. As the plane touched down at Los Angeles International Airport, Anya felt a mix of relief and anxiety. The 5-hour flight had felt much longer due to Rita's constant cold shoulder and barely concealed disdain. But now, knowing her father was waiting just beyond the arrival gate, Anya's spirit lifted. The off-duty crew member who had been observing the situation, cabin manager Jenny Torres, was already composing an email on her phone. Having worked for Skyline Airways for 15 years, she immediately recognized Anya as the daughter of Raj Sharma, the airline CEO. Jenny had attended multiple training sessions led by Mr. Sharma himself, where he emphasized the importance of treating every passenger, especially young ones, with dignity and respect. As other passengers began gathering their belongings, Rita's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Los Angeles. Premium cabin passengers may exit first, followed by..." She paused, throwing a pointed look at Anya, "our regular passengers." The businessman who had noticed Rita's behavior earlier stood up and turned to Anya. "Would you like to exit with me, young lady? I'm headed to the same terminal." His kind gesture brought a small smile to Anya's face, but before she could respond, Rita intervened. "Unaccompanied minors must wait until all other passengers have deplaned," Rita announced loudly, despite this not being airline policy. "We wouldn't want anyone getting lost in the crowd." Jenny Torres had seen enough. She approached Rita and spoke in a low, professional tone. "That's not our protocol, Rita. Passengers in premium cabin have priority deplaning. I'll escort her out." Rita's face flushed with annoyance. "Since when do you have authority over my flight? You're not even on duty." "I'm still a cabin manager," Jenny replied calmly. "And I'm concerned about the level of service being provided." As this exchange took place, Anya gathered her belongings, trying to make herself as small as possible. Several passengers shot disapproving looks at Rita, while others offered Anya encouraging smiles. The contrast between Rita's behavior and the kindness of strangers wasn't lost on the young girl. Meanwhile, in the arrival terminal, Raj Sharma stood waiting for his daughter. As CEO of Skyline Airways, he could have easily accessed the premium arrival lounge, but he preferred waiting by the regular gate. He enjoyed observing his airline's operations from a passenger's perspective, often gaining valuable insights this way. Standing beside him was Diane Foster, the airline's head of customer experience. They had just finished a productive meeting about enhancing the airline's unaccompanied minor program. You'll be proud to see the latest satisfaction scores, Raj, Diane was saying. Our program is rated top in the industry. Raj smiled, checking his watch. That's wonderful news. And I'll get first-hand feedback soon. Anya's flying alone for the first time today. I'm curious to hear about her experience. As passengers began streaming out of the jet bridge, Jenny Torres made her way to the front of the plane with Anya. Rita stepped forward to intervene one last time. I need to complete her paperwork before she leaves, she insisted, reaching for Anya's documents. I'll handle that, Jenny said firmly. You should focus on completing the cabin checklist. Rita's expression darkened, but she couldn't argue with a superior. As Jenny escorted Anya through the jet bridge, she noticed the young girl's hands were trembling slightly. You handled yourself very well back there, Jenny said softly. Your father would be proud. Anya looked up, surprised. You know my father? Jenny smiled warmly. Many of us do. He's helped make Skyline Airways a wonderful place to work. Well, for most of us, she added, thinking of Rita's behavior. Just before they reached the terminal, Jenny knelt down to Anya's level. Would you like me to tell your father about what happened on the flight? Anya thought for a moment, then shook her head. No, thank you. I don't want anyone to get in trouble because of me. This response, so mature and considerate, only strengthened Jenny's resolve to report the incident. Such kindness in the face of mistreatment deserved recognition. As they emerged into the terminal, Anya spotted her father and broke into a run. Raj scooped her up in a warm embrace, his face beaming. There's my brave traveler. How was your first solo flight? Before Anya could respond, Rita emerged from the jet bridge, having followed them out. She was carrying a clipboard and wearing what appeared to be her first genuine smile of the day. Mr. Foster? I'm looking for Anya Foster's guardian to sign. Her voice trailed off as she took in the scene before her. The man hugging Anya wasn't just any passenger's father, he was Raj Sharma, CEO of Skyline Airways, her ultimate boss. The color drained from Rita's face as realization dawned. Diane Foster stepped forward, her expression professional but concerned. Is there a problem with Anya's paperwork? Rita stammered, no, I just needed. I mean. She looked desperately between Anya, Raj, and Diane, the clipboard shaking slightly in her hands. Jenny Torres smoothly intervened, taking the clipboard. I'll handle the documentation, Rita. You should head back to complete the cabin checklist before your next flight. As Rita retreated hastily toward the jet bridge, Raj turned his attention back to his daughter. So, tell me all about your adventure in the sky. His warm smile faltered slightly as he noticed something in Anya's eyes, a hint of relief that seemed too profound for a simple journey's end. Diane and Jenny exchanged knowing looks. This story was far from over, and tomorrow would bring some necessary conversations about the true meaning of customer service, regardless of a passenger's age or status. But for now, Anya was safe in her father's arms, her first solo flight finally complete. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the tall windows of Skyline Airways corporate headquarters. Raj Sharma sat in his office, reviewing Jenny Torres's detailed report about the previous day's incidents. His expression grew more concerned with each paragraph he read. The night before, after they had returned home, Anya had finally opened up about her experience on the flight. She hadn't wanted to cause trouble, but over dinner, the story had spilled out, the ignored requests for water, the unnecessary restrictions, the hostile attitude. Raj had listened carefully, his heart heavy with both pride at his daughter's resilience and disappointment in his employees' behavior. A gentle knock on his office door interrupted his thoughts. Diane Foster entered, carrying a tablet loaded with passenger feedback from yesterday's flight. Good morning, Raj. I think you'll want to see this. Multiple passengers had submitted comments about Rita's behavior toward the young girl in 3C. The businessman who had tried to help Anya had written a particularly detailed account, expressing his concern about the airline's treatment of unaccompanied minors. "We've also received this," Diane said, pulling up an email from Mrs. Chen, the gate agent from New York. She had documented Rita's initial resistance to seating Anya in the premium cabin. It seems this wasn't an isolated incident. Raj leaned back in his chair, thinking about the bigger picture. "This isn't just about Anya," he said quietly. "If Rita treats one child this way, how many others have faced similar treatment? How many young passengers have been made to feel unwelcome on our airlines?" As if on cue, his office phone buzzed. His assistant's voice came through the speaker. "Sir, Human Resources Director Mrs. Patel is here with Rita Patterson for the 9:30 meeting." "Send them in," Raj responded, sharing a glance with Diane. This wouldn't be an easy conversation, but it was a necessary one. Rita entered the office, looking significantly different from the previous day. Gone was the arrogant demeanor, replaced by nervous energy as she realized the full extent of her situation. Mrs. Patel, a seasoned HR professional, followed her in. "Please, have a seat," Raj gestured to the chairs across from his desk. "We need to discuss yesterday's flight from New York." Rita shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Sharma, I want to apologize. If I had known Anya was your daughter dash." Raj held up his hand, stopping her mid-sentence. "That's exactly the problem, Rita. It shouldn't matter whose daughter she was. Every child on our airlines deserves to be treated with respect and kindness." Diane opened her tablet again. "We have reports spanning the last 6 months showing a pattern of similar behavior toward young passengers. Complaints about denied service, unnecessary restrictions, and hostile attitudes." Rita's face paled. I didn't realize there were so many complaints. I just think children require stricter handling to maintain order on flights." Mrs. Patel interjected gently, "Our airline's policy is clear about treating all passengers with respect, regardless of age. The program exists to provide extra care, not extra restrictions." "Let me share something with you," Raj said, standing to look out his office window at the planes taking off and landing in the distance. "When I started this airline 20 years ago, I was a young father traveling frequently with my baby daughter. I experienced firsthand how challenging air travel can be for families and young passengers." He turned back to face Rita. "That's why we developed one of the industry's most comprehensive programs. It's not about special treatment, it's about ensuring every young traveler feels safe and welcome. When we fail at that, we fail as an airline." Tears welled up in Rita's eyes as the reality of her actions sank in. "I never thought about it that way. I was so focused on maintaining order that I forgot about the human element." "That's why we're here today," Mrs. Patel explained. "This isn't just about disciplinary action. It's about understanding where we went wrong and how we can do better." Diane pulled up another document on her tablet. "We've developed a new training program focused on empathy in customer service, particularly regarding young passengers. Rita, we want you to be one of the first to go through it." Rita looked up, surprised. She had expected to be fired on the spot. "You're giving me another chance." "Everyone deserves an opportunity to learn and grow," Raj said firmly. "However, you'll be on probation for the next 6 months. During this time, you'll work closely with our program coordinators, understanding the importance of their work firsthand." Mrs. Patel added, "You'll also be required to complete 40 hours of community service with our airline's youth aviation program. Sometimes, the best way to change our perspective is to spend time with those we've misjudged." As the meeting continued, Jenny Torres was conducting a training session for new flight attendants in another part of the building. She used yesterday's events as a teaching moment, without naming names, to illustrate the importance of compassionate service. "Remember," Jenny told her attentive audience, "every passenger has a story. That nervous child traveling alone might be flying to see a parent. That teenager might be heading to college. Our job isn't just to serve drinks and demonstrate safety features, it's to make every journey memorable for the right reasons. Back in Raj's office, the meeting was wrapping up. Rita stood, her demeanor completely transformed from the previous day. "Mr. Sharma, may I write a letter of apology to Anya?" Raj smiled gently. "I appreciate the gesture, but instead of a letter, why not channel that energy into changing how you interact with all our young passengers? Show them the kindness and respect that Anya deserved yesterday." As Rita and Mrs. Patel left the office, Diane turned to Raj. "You handled that well. Many CEOs would have simply terminated her employment. Sometimes the hardest challenges provide the best opportunities for growth," Raj responded, picking up a framed photo from his desk, a much younger version of himself holding baby Anya on her first flight. "Besides, this was never about punishment. It's about making sure every child who flies with us feels as safe and valued as I wanted Anya to feel on that first flight." 2 months after the incident, Rita stood nervously at the entrance of Skyline Airways Youth Aviation Center. The modern facility, filled with flight simulators and interactive exhibits, was designed to inspire the next generation of aviation enthusiasts. As part of her probation, she would be spending her day off here, working with young visitors. The center's director, Dr. Mei Wong, greeted her with unexpected warmth. "Welcome. We're excited to have you join us today. We have a group of 30 children coming from the local elementary school." Rita twisted her hands anxiously. "I'm not sure I'm good with children. That's sort of why I'm here in the first place." Dr. Wong smiled knowingly. "Sometimes the best teachers are those who had to learn the lessons themselves. Just watch and learn today." As the yellow school buses pulled up outside, Rita felt her anxiety rising. But as the children filed in, their eyes wide with wonder at the miniature airport terminal setup and the huge model airplanes hanging from the ceiling, something unexpected happened. Their enthusiasm was contagious. A small girl tugged at Rita's sleeve. "Miss, are you a real flight attendant?" Her eyes sparkled with admiration, reminding Rita painfully of Anya. "Can you show me how to do the safety demonstration?" Before Rita could respond, more children gathered around her, all eager to learn. Dr. Wong nodded encouragingly, and Rita found herself demonstrating the safety procedures she knew by heart. The children mimicked her movements, giggling as they pretended to put on oxygen masks and locate emergency exits. "You're a natural," Dr. Wong commented during their lunch break. "You just needed to see them as individuals, not obstacles." Meanwhile, back at Skyline headquarters, Raj was meeting with his executive team to review the changes implemented since the incident. Jenny Torres, recently promoted to head of crew training, was presenting the results of their new empathy-focused training program. "The feedback has been overwhelming positive," Jenny reported, displaying a chart on the conference room screen. "Customer satisfaction scores for our program have increased by 15% in just 2 months. Diane Foster added, "We've also seen a significant uptick in positive social media mentions." This video of one of our flight attendants helping a nervous young passenger went viral last week. She played a clip showing a Skyline crew member patiently explaining the flight process to a wide-eyed child. "But the most significant change," Jenny continued, "has been in our crew's attitude. They're not just following procedures, they're understanding why these procedures exist." As if to illustrate her point, her tablet chimed with a new message. It was a photo from Dr. Wong at the Youth Aviation Center. Rita was surrounded by children, teaching them how to fold paper airplanes while wearing a genuine smile. Back at the center, Rita was discovering something she never expected: she was enjoying herself. During the paper airplane competition she organized, she found herself cheering just as loudly as the children when their creations took flight. "Miss Rita," a boy called out, "can you help me? Mine keeps nosediving." Rita knelt beside him, examining his paper airplane. "The wings need to be even for it to fly straight," she explained, helping him make adjustments. just like a real plane needs perfect balance. As she helped him, she remembered all the times she dismissed children's questions on her flights, viewing them as annoyances rather than opportunities to inspire. The realization made her chest tight with regret, but also determination to do better. During the afternoon session, Dr. Wong asked Rita to share stories about her experiences as a flight attendant. To her surprise, Rita found herself opening up about her journey, including her recent lessons about kindness and understanding. "I used to think being professional meant being strict," she admitted to the attentive young audience. "But I was wrong. True professionalism is about making everyone feel welcome and safe, no matter their age." One of the teachers chaperoning the group approached Rita afterward. "Thank you for being so honest with them. It's important for children to see that adults can learn and grow too." That evening, as Rita prepared to leave the center, Dr. Wong handed her a stack of thank you cards the children had made. Each one was decorated with drawings of airplanes and stick figures wearing flight attendant uniforms. "They've asked if you can come back next week," Dr. Wong said with a knowing smile. "We're having a special session on in-flight service, and they specifically requested you as their teacher." Rita felt tears welling up in her eyes as she read the cards. One in particular caught her attention, a drawing of a flight attendant holding hands with a small passenger, with the words, "Thank you for making flying fun." On her drive home, Rita's phone buzzed with a message from Mrs. Patel in HR. The quarterly crew evaluations were coming up, and her supervisors had noted significant improvement in her interactions with young passengers. There was even mention of considering her for the airline's mentor program, where experienced crew members guided new hires. That night, Rita sat at her kitchen table, looking through the children's cards again. She pulled out her laptop and began typing an email to Raj Sharma. It wasn't the apology letter to Anya she'd originally planned to write. Instead, it was a proposal for a new initiative, a program where flight attendants would spend time at the Youth Aviation Center as part of their regular training. "Sometimes," she wrote, "we need to see through a child's eyes to remember why we fell in love with aviation in the first place." As she hit send, Rita glanced at her flight attendant uniform hanging by the door, ready for tomorrow's shift. For the first time in years, she found herself looking forward to seeing who might be sitting in seat 3C, regardless of their age. 6 months had passed since the incident that changed Skyline Airways' approach to young passengers. The autumn sun cast long shadows across the airline's training center as Rita stood before a group of new flight attendants, sharing her story as part of their orientation. "I was that person who saw children as disruptions to my perfectly organized flight," she admitted to the attentive trainees. "Until one day, my prejudice taught me the hardest lesson of my career." Her voice carried the wisdom of someone who had learned from their mistakes. In the back of the room, Jenny Torres watched with pride. The transformation in Rita had exceeded everyone's expectations. Not only had she completed her probation successfully, but she had also become one of the airline's most effective advocates for youth-friendly air travel. After the session, a trainee approached Rita. "I used to work at another airline," she confided. "They told us to just tolerate children, not engage with them. Your approach is so different." Rita smiled, remembering her own journey. Children aren't just small passengers to be tolerated. They're future pilots, engineers, and yes, maybe even airline CEOs. She thought of Anya, whose story she now shared with permission, though always keeping her identity private. Meanwhile, in the main terminal, Raj was conducting one of his regular underground boss walks, disguised in casual clothes, observing the airline's operations from a passenger's perspective. He paused near gate C12, where a heartwarming scene was unfolding. A flight attendant was kneeling beside a worried-looking boy, probably around 8 years old. "First time flying alone?" she asked gently. When the boy nodded, she pulled out a small pilot's logbook from her pocket. "Here's something special we give to our brave solo travelers. You can track your flight just like real pilots do." Raj recognized the logbooks, they were part of the new welcome package that Rita had helped design. The initiative had been so successful that 3 other airlines had reached out to Skyline about implementing similar programs. His phone buzzed with a message from Diane Foster. The latest industry rankings were in. Skyline had just been voted most family-friendly airline by International Travel magazine. The accompanying article specifically praised their revolutionary approach to young passengers. At the Youth Aviation Center, Dr. Wong was hosting a special event. The center had become a model for other airports, with delegations from around the world visiting to study its programs. Today, airline representatives from Europe and Asia were observing a session. Rita's proposal had blossomed into a full-fledged training module. Every new Skyline crew member now spent 2 days at the center, learning to see air travel through children's eyes. The program had been so successful that the airport authority had doubled the center's funding. The key was changing the perspective, Dr. Wong explained to the visitors. When we stopped seeing young passengers as challenges and started seeing them as opportunities, everything shifted. In a nearby simulation room, a group of children were experiencing their first flight. The mock cabin, complete with real airline seats and windows showing animated clouds, helped anxious young travelers become comfortable with flying. A small girl clutched her teddy bear as cabin pressure changes were simulated. The instructor, a former nervous flyer herself, explained how airplanes work, turning scary noises into exciting adventures. "That sound means our wings are getting ready to help us fly," she explained, making the girl smile. Back at headquarters, Mrs. Patel was reviewing the latest employee satisfaction surveys. The numbers told a stunning story. Crew morale had improved significantly since the introduction of the new training program. Flight attendants reported feeling more fulfilled in their roles, with many citing their interactions with young passengers as career highlights. In the corporate communications department, a team was preparing to launch a new campaign inspired by the changes of the past 6 months. "Every journey matters, every passenger counts" would become more than just a slogan, it was a promise built from real experience. That afternoon, Rita received an unexpected email. A major aviation conference wanted her to be a keynote speaker, sharing Skyline's transformation into a leader in youth-friendly air travel. The invitation noted how her personal story of change had inspired other airlines to re-examine their approaches. From obstacle to opportunity, the email read, "Your journey represents the kind of transformation our industry needs." As Rita prepared for her evening flight, she spotted a familiar face at the gate, Mrs. Chen, the kind gate agent from that fateful day in New York. They hadn't seen each other since the incident. "I hear you're quite the celebrity in the youth aviation world now," Mrs. Chen said warmly. "Those kids at the center can't stop talking about Miss Rita and her amazing paper airplanes." Rita blushed, adjusting her wing-shaped pin, a special recognition given to crew members who received exceptional feedback from young passengers and their families. "I learned that sometimes our biggest mistakes can lead to our greatest opportunities for growth." The gate area was filling up with passengers, including several unaccompanied minors. Rita watched as her colleagues welcomed them with genuine warmth, handing out logbooks and special wings. One young girl showed off her Skyline Junior pilot badge proudly to everyone nearby. "You know," Mrs. Chen said thoughtfully, "sometimes it takes one person's journey to change an entire system. Your story has become a teaching moment for the whole industry." As boarding began, Rita took her position at the aircraft door. A boy wearing a junior pilot badge approached, his eyes wide with excitement. "Are you Miss Rita?" he asked. "My friend told me you make the best paper airplanes." Rita knelt down to his level, just as she'd learned to do at the Youth Aviation Center. "Welcome aboard, Captain," she said with a genuine smile. "How about I teach you a special pilot's greeting you can use when we land?" As she helped the boy to his seat, Rita caught her reflection in the cabin window. The person looking back was so different from the bitter flight attendant of 6 months ago. She had learned that true service came not from enforcing rules, but from opening hearts. 1 year after the incident, Skyline Airways' main terminal was transformed for a special evening event. The annual Young Aviators Dream Night had drawn hundreds of children and their families. What started as a small initiative had grown into an industry-leading program, and tonight was its crowning achievement. The terminal's usual business atmosphere had given way to an aviation wonderland. Flight simulators lined the walls, retired pilots shared stories at mini-workshops, and the ceiling projected a mesmerizing display of constellations that pilots use for navigation. At the center of it all stood Rita, now the program's lead coordinator, surrounded by eager young faces. "Who wants to learn about the secret language of pilots?" she asked, her eyes twinkling. A forest of small hands shot up immediately. As she demonstrated how pilots communicate with air traffic control, she caught sight of a familiar figure entering the terminal, Anya, now 12, accompanied by her father. Their presence wasn't just coincidental. Tonight marked the launch of Skyline's Future Flyers scholarship program, inspired by the events of that fateful flight a year ago. The airline had committed to funding aviation education for underprivileged youth, breaking down barriers that had long kept the industry exclusive. "Your difficult experience sparked something remarkable," Raj told his daughter as they watched Rita engage with the children. "Sometimes the best changes come from our hardest moments." Anya nodded thoughtfully. "Dad, remember how I didn't want to tell you about what happened on the flight at first? I was worried about getting someone in trouble. But now I understand that speaking up can lead to good things." Across the terminal, Jenny Torres was leading a session called "A Day in the Life of a Flight Crew." The audience wasn't just children, airline executives from across the country sat in the back, taking notes. Skyline's revolutionary approach to young passengers had caught the industry's attention, and many were eager to learn. "The key," Jenny explained, "is to see every interaction as an opportunity to inspire. We're not just transporting passengers, we're nurturing the next generation of aviation professionals." In another corner, Dr. Wong from the Youth Aviation Center had set up an interactive display about aircraft design. Children crowded around a table filled with materials for building model planes, their faces intense with concentration as they applied principles of aerodynamics they'd just learned. "Miss Rita," a small voice called out. A young girl ran up, holding a carefully folded paper airplane. "I used the technique you taught us last week. Look how far it flies." The plane soared across the terminal in a perfect arc, drawing applause from onlookers. Rita beamed with pride. Just a year ago, she would have seen such activity in the terminal as chaos. Now she recognized it as the sound of dreams taking flight. Mrs. Patel appeared beside her, clipboard in hand. "The board just approved expanding the program to all our international routes," she announced. They were particularly impressed by the data from our pilot program: customer satisfaction up 40%, youth engagement increased by 300%, and crew retention improved significantly. But the numbers, impressive as they were, told only part of the story. The real magic was in the moments, like when a nervous young traveler discovered their fear of flying transformed into fascination, or when a child from a disadvantaged background realized that a career in aviation was within reach. As the evening progressed, Diane Foster took the stage for a special announcement. "Tonight, we're not just celebrating a program," she began. "We're celebrating a change in how the entire aviation industry views its youngest passengers." She unveiled a large screen showing live video connections with airports around the world. Similar events were being launched at Skyline's partner airlines, each adapting the program to their own culture while maintaining its core principle: every young passenger deserves to be treated with respect and enthusiasm. Rita was called to the stage to share her story. As she approached the microphone, she saw faces both familiar and new in the audience. Mrs. Chen had flown in specially for the event. The businessman who had stood up for Anya that day was there with his own children. Even some of the passengers from that fateful flight had come to show their support. "A year ago, I saw children as disruptions to my perfect flight routine," Rita began honestly. Today, I see them as the future of aviation. And that change in perspective didn't just transform my career, it transformed me as a person. She went on to describe the ripple effects, how the Youth Aviation Center had expanded to 3 new locations, how the crew training program had been revolutionized, and how other airlines were following suit. But most importantly, she talked about the individual stories, the shy child who discovered a passion for engineering, the nervous flyer who became a junior flight attendant, the underprivileged student who now had a path to becoming a pilot. After the speech, as families mingled and children continued their aviation adventures, Anya approached Rita. It was their first real conversation since that difficult flight. "I wanted to thank you," Anya said, surprising Rita. "Not for what happened on the flight, but for what you did afterward. You turned something bad into something amazing." Rita felt tears welling up. "No, thank you," she replied softly. "Your dignity that day, even when I wasn't showing any, taught me more than years of training ever could." As the evening wound down, Raj gathered everyone for a group photo beneath a banner reading, "Every journey matters, every dream takes flight." The image would later become symbolic of the industry's transformation, a reminder that sometimes the most powerful changes start with a single difficult moment. Looking around at the joy-filled terminal, Rita realized that her journey had come full circle. The paper airplanes soaring through the air, the excited chatter about cockpit instruments, the dreams taking shape in young minds, this was what aviation was truly about. Not just the destination, but the inspiration found along the way. 18 months after the incident, Skyline Airways headquarters buzzed with excitement. The International Aviation Council had chosen their airline to host the first-ever Global Youth in Aviation Summit. Representatives from airlines worldwide gathered to learn how one difficult flight had sparked an industry-wide revolution in young passenger care. The Grand Conference Hall was filled with aviation professionals, but the most important seats were reserved for a special group, young aviation enthusiasts from diverse backgrounds, each with their own story of how Skyline's programs had changed their lives. Rita, now Director of Youth Engagement Programs, stood at the podium, her journey from that fateful day serving as the summit's opening story. Behind her, a large screen displayed photos of the numerous initiatives that had grown from that single incident. "Change," she began, "doesn't always announce itself with fanfare. Sometimes it arrives in Seat 3C, teaching us lessons we didn't know we needed to learn." The audience chuckled knowingly, her story had become legendary in aviation circles. In the front row, Anya sat next to her father, now a few inches taller and more confident than ever. She had just been selected as the youth ambassador for Skyline's newest initiative, a mentorship program connecting experienced aviation professionals with aspiring young enthusiasts from underserved communities. Dr. Wong, who had flown in from overseeing the opening of the 5th Youth Aviation Center, shared remarkable statistics. "In the past year alone, we've seen a 200% increase in young people pursuing aviation-related education. The impact of making children feel welcome in airports and on planes goes far beyond customer satisfaction, it's shaping the future of our industry." Jenny Torres, recently appointed as Skyline's Chief of Customer Experience, presented their latest innovation, a comprehensive guide for airlines worldwide on creating youth-friendly environments. "What started as a response to one incident has become a global standard for excellence in aviation hospitality," she explained. During the lunch break, attendees toured the newest addition to Skyline's headquarters, the Young Aviators Innovation Lab. Here, children could experiment with flight principles, aircraft design, and even help solve real-world aviation challenges through specially designed programs. A wall of screens showed live feeds from Skyline flights around the world. In Dubai, a flight attendant was helping a young passenger learn basic Arabic aviation terms. In Sydney, a crew member was explaining the Southern Cross constellation to fascinated children. In London, a junior pilot program was conducting its first simulator session. Diane Foster led a panel discussion titled "Transportation to Transformation, the New Era of Aviation Education." Airlines from 6 continents shared how they had adapted Skyline's model to their own cultures and needs. A Japanese airline had created an anime series about young air travelers. A Brazilian carrier had launched mobile aviation labs that visited remote communities. Mrs. Patel, now global head of aviation education partnerships, revealed the program's latest achievement. Starting next year, our scholarship program will sponsor 1,000 underprivileged youth worldwide to pursue aviation careers. This isn't just about making flying friendlier, it's about breaking down barriers that have existed for generations. In a touching moment, the businessman who had witnessed Rita's behavior on that original flight took the stage. He had since become a major donor to the Future Flyers Foundation. "I almost submitted a complaint that day," he admitted. "Instead, I watched as this airline turned a moment of poor judgment into a movement of positive change." Mrs. Chen, who had greeted Anya at the gate that fateful day, shared her perspective on how ground staff operations had evolved. "We don't just process passengers anymore," she explained. "We're the first chapter in what could be a young person's lifelong love affair with aviation." The summit's afternoon session focused on technology and innovation. Skyline unveiled its new virtual reality program, allowing young passengers to visit the cockpit safely during flight, learning about instruments and navigation from actual pilots through secure video links. Rita's team demonstrated the latest version of the Junior Pilot Logbook, now an interactive digital app that helped children learn about their flight's route, aircraft type, and aviation principles while earning educational badges. The app had already been downloaded over 1 million times. During the closing ceremony, Raj shared his vision for the future. "What happened on that flight could have ended with disciplinary action and a policy memo," he reflected. "Instead, it became a catalyst for reimagining how we serve our youngest passengers. Today, we're not just transforming our airline, we're nurturing the next generation of aviation pioneers." As if to prove his point, a group of teenagers from the first Young Aviators program took the stage. Among them was a girl who had been inspired by her initially frightening solo flight to become a student pilot. Another was developing an app to help anxious young travelers. A third had started a STEM club focusing on aerospace engineering in his underserved community. The day concluded with a special sunset flight for summit attendees. Rita, serving as lead flight attendant, watched with joy as aviation executives from around the world experienced firsthand the magic of a truly youth-friendly flight. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Anya, who had joined the flight as youth ambassador, helped Rita demonstrate their new approach to young passengers. Together, they turned routine safety instructions into engaging learning moments and transformed mundane flight processes into adventures in aviation education. Looking out at the sunset painting the sky in brilliant hues, Rita reflected on her journey. The incident that could have ended her career had instead launched a global movement. Every child who now boarded a plane wasn't just a passenger, they were a potential future pilot, engineer, or innovator. As she helped a young passenger adjust his window shade to see a spectacular cloud formation, Rita remembered her own transformation. Sometimes, she thought, our greatest mistakes lead us to our most important missions. The smile on the child's face as he learned about cloud types at 35,000 feet was all the confirmation she needed. 2 years had passed since that pivotal flight, and Skyline Airways Terminal 3 was hosting a very special graduation ceremony. The first class of the Future Flyers Academy was completing their initial training, and among the graduates was a familiar face, the nervous young boy from Rita's first day at the Youth Aviation Center, now confident and ready to begin his journey toward becoming a pilot. Rita sat in the audience, watching with pride as 25 students from diverse backgrounds received their certificates. Each graduate had a unique story, but they shared one common thread: they had all been inspired by Skyline's transformation into an airline that believed in nurturing young dreams. The ceremony was being live-streamed to youth aviation centers across the globe, where thousands of aspiring young aviators watched their peers achieve this milestone. What had started as a local initiative had blossomed into an international movement. Anya, now 14 and a junior ambassador for youth aviation programs, took the stage to deliver the keynote speech. 2 years ago, I was just a scared girl on a flight, feeling unwelcome and small, she began. Today, I stand before you as proof that every challenge can become an opportunity for change. In the front row, Raj listened to his daughter with tears in his eyes. Next to him sat airline executives from across the industry, all of whom had implemented their own versions of Skyline's youth programs. The incident that could have been a PR nightmare had instead revolutionized how airlines approached their youngest passengers. Dr. Wong, who now oversaw a network of 15 youth aviation centers worldwide, shared the latest impact statistics. In the past 2 years, we've seen a 500% increase in young people expressing interest in aviation careers. More importantly, these numbers include children from communities that historically had limited access to aviation opportunities. Jenny Torres, speaking about the transformed crew training program, revealed that Skyline now had a waiting list of experienced flight attendants wanting to transfer from other airlines. They've heard about our culture of nurturing young passengers, she explained, and they want to be part of this movement. The ceremony featured a special surprise, a video compilation of messages from children around the world who had been impacted by the program. A young girl from a remote village spoke about how a Skyline flight attendant had inspired her to study aerospace engineering. A boy from an inner-city school shared how the Youth Aviation Center had given him a new purpose. Rita's eyes welled up as she watched. Her journey from that difficult day had come full circle. The flight attendant who once saw children as inconveniences now led a global initiative that was changing lives. Mrs. Patel presented the latest expansion of the scholarship program, a partnership with major universities to create dedicated aviation education tracks for underprivileged students. We're not just making flying more welcoming, she announced. We're breaking down barriers that have existed in aviation for generations. The ceremony included a special recognition of the change makers, staff members who had gone above and beyond in supporting young passengers. Mrs. Chen, the gate agent who had first welcomed Anya 2 years ago, received a standing ovation for her role in training ground staff worldwide. As the formal proceedings concluded, the terminal transformed for a celebration that embodied Skyline's new spirit. Young graduates mingled with airline executives, sharing their dreams and innovations. A group of children demonstrated a flight simulator they had helped design, while others showcased their aviation-themed art projects. In a quiet moment, Rita found herself standing next to Anya near a window overlooking the runway. "You know," Rita said softly, "I never properly thanked you for what you taught me that day." Anya smiled, watching a plane take off into the sunset. "Sometimes the best teachers are those who don't know they're teaching," she replied with wisdom beyond her years. The celebration continued as evening fell, with the terminal's windows offering a perfect view of arriving and departing flights. Each plane represented countless opportunities for creating positive experiences for young passengers, opportunities that might have been missed if not for the lessons learned 2 years ago. Diane Foster unveiled the latest initiative, a children's book series called Sky Stories, featuring real experiences of young passengers and crew members. The first volume included Rita's story, thoughtfully written to help other aviation professionals understand the importance of welcoming young travelers. As the event drew to a close, Raj gathered everyone for a final announcement. "Today isn't just about celebrating what we've achieved," he said. "It's about committing to the future. Starting next month, every major airport serving Skyline will have a youth aviation center. Every flight will have specially trained crew members dedicated to young passengers. Every child who steps onto our planes will know they're valued." The announcement was met with enthusiastic applause, but the most touching response came from an unexpected source. A young girl, no more than 7, approached Rita with a hand-drawn picture. It showed a flight attendant and a child standing together beside an airplane, both smiling. "Is this us?" Rita asked, kneeling down to the girl's level. The girl shook her head. "No, This is me when I grow up. I want to be like you, helping other kids feel happy on airplanes." As Rita hugged the young girl, she caught sight of her reflection in the terminal window. The bitter flight attendant from 2 years ago was gone, replaced by someone who had found her true calling. Behind her, the next generation of aviation professionals celebrated their graduation, while outside, planes continued their endless dance of takeoffs and landings. Each flight now carried not just passengers, but possibilities. Each interaction between crew and young travelers held the potential to inspire a future pilot, engineer, or innovator. What had started as one difficult moment had grown into a movement that would impact aviation for generations to come. As the celebration wound down, Rita picked up one of the paper airplanes that had been used in a demonstration earlier. She handed it to the young girl who had given her the drawing. Together, they launched it into the air, watching it soar gracefully across the terminal, a simple symbol of how far they had come, and how far they could still go. The paper airplane landed at Raja's feet. He picked it up and smiled, remembering that difficult day 2 years ago. Sometimes the most turbulent flights lead to the most beautiful destinations. In this case, one flight had changed not just an airline, but an entire industry's approach to its youngest dreamers.